Welcome to the Academy for the third Academy debate show of the season. I'm your host, Dolphin Radio. Tonight's debate asks the question of whether or not nuclear energy is good for our planet. Hoping to see three-eyed fish and kids who can shoot laser beams out of their eyes is the Politipod. Pod?
Say what's poppin', Jimbo.
And preferring candles and salt soaking as a food preservation method is Direwolf. Direwolf, say hi.
Hey Cubs, Direwolf here.
Excellent. Working behind the scenes to make it all work is Eggman, the Nosferatu. Eggman, why don't you give us a little bit of your wisdom? Thanks, Egg. Tonight's debate will be slightly different than our previous debates, but I'll be on hand to keep it following the normal flow of events. Opening remarks will take place, and following that, I'll explain how we're going to kind of change things up a little. Anyway, to the winner today goes $25. And as far as I know, both of our competitors are going to be donating their winnings to a charity tonight. Pod, why don't you tell me about the charity you're going to be endorsing?
So I actually got two charities tonight. I'm going to be donating $5 to Mission 22, which is a organization that helps with veterans who suffer from PTSD and also helps with veterans who have suicidal thoughts and problems like that. They help them get counseling. They help them try to reduce the number from 22 veterans a day who die, which is where they get their namesake, down to 0 because one is too many. The other charity is going to Mad Woman Muse because they just lost their daughter not too long ago, and I'm wanting to help them out. So $20 is going to them, $5 is going to Mission 22.
All right, thank you. And Direwolf, why don't you tell us about your charities?
I'll be giving $25 to Mad Woman Muses because I'm not racist like some other people.
Ripperoni.
All parties are aware of the rules and accepting of the stakes. Gentlemen, good luck. We begin the argument at 5 minutes with the Politipod telling us all how we should make way for the human octopus hybrid.
We're not doing the coin toss this time?
No, I decided to start with Pod because I ran out of bottle caps and I'm not going to toss my coins.
I want to defer to Direwolf.
Okay.
That's suspicious.
In that case, arguing why we should spend most of our day banging rocks together, Direwolf, you have 5 minutes. The floor is yours.
All right. My position is that we need to phase out and eventually ban all nuclear energy production because it is unsafe for the people and the environment. I am doing the devil's advocate for this topic, so I'll do my best. Nuclear power is not controllable and is subject to human error. It has made devastating long-term and short-term effects, such in places such as Fukushima, and is a perfect example of what could happen when things go wrong. The amount of radiation is 137, which is a half-life of 30 years, released during Fukushima's disaster, was more than when the bomb went off in Hiroshima. So sorry, Hiroshima was 137. And 168 was for Fukushima. The accident was caused by a tsunami that caused 1,600 lives to be lost. According to the United Nations Scientific Committee on the Effects of Atomic Radiation, they've lost billions in cleanup, which still hasn't been cleaned up today. They're still cleaning up today, and the reactors are still not secured today. There's still a danger they could have further leaks. They've already lost billions of dollars and over 1,000 lives just because of one accident. Over 1/3 of the U.S. population lives within 50 miles of a nuclear power plant. Currently, 105 different plants are operating and 65 sites throughout the United States, 15 of which are in high-risk earthquake zones. Chernobyl is another example. 7 billion in damage, 31 dead in the initial incident, and 4,000 dead due to cancer afterwards. In total, there's been $162 billion in damages and untold thousands of lives lost to accidents worldwide since only 1952. Most of the existing nuclear power reactors are classified as Generation 2. And are widely regarded as being obsolete. Currently, Generation 3 power plants are only operational. Only 4 Class 3s are operational in Japan. And Japan's a place that had the best reactors, but still had theirs fail. The actual cost to building new reactors is 3 times what's being projected. So whatever PolitiPod suggests, whatever price they say it costs to build one, they've been not even close to building it at that price. What's something that's important to note is that back in the 1900s, we were at 17.5% of power produced by nuclear power plants. Now we're down to 11% in 2014. We're using less nuclear power today, and we're safer for it. We're having more nuclear power plants shut down. According to the environmental studies research in Australia, they believe that they can use clean, safe, renewable energy for 100% of their needs by 2030. Same with Germany. Now, for the cost, nuclear power costs 2.10 cents kilowatt hour. The closest to that in renewable is solar at 4.4 to 6.1 with industrial. That is twice the price, but we're not having to deal with the additional cost of having radioactive waste we can't get rid of, the huge risk of human error or natural disasters that are outside of our control causing a huge accident, or the possibility of terrorism. We have had, like I said, 105 nuclear power plants. Each one of those is a huge risk for terrorism. The NRC has found that the protections for our power plants do not consider the air and water-based attacks. They do not address the possibility of tagging groups using multiple entry points, and have determined that our power plants are a huge national security risk. So it's not healthy for our people, it's not healthy for the environment, and it is a huge security risk to our country. That's it. That's my opening statement. So you don't have to wait out the time.
Well argued opening statement, Dire Wolf, and poor microphone control on my half there. PolitiPod, why don't you come in with a great opening statement on why should we all get ready for the human-octopus hybrids? You have 5 minutes. The floor is yours. Begin.
Well, I'm actually going to dispute a lot of Direwolf's claims here. Actually, nuclear energy for the foreseeable future is actually a much cheaper solution in the long term. It is also far better for the planet in the long term, and it also actually has not caused as many deaths as there are actually nuclear power plants in the world today. It is very disputed about how many deaths that have actually been caused by nuclear reactors, but estimates range from anywhere between 200 to about 155, if I'm not mistaken. So it's relatively nuclear reactors with the amount of reactors that we have today, and we have had since the 1950s. We actually have a relatively low number of deaths. You also have to think about this. There are actually far more nuclear reactors that were unstable back in the 60s, 50s, and 70s. That's what things like Greenpeace try to promote, this myth that nuclear energy is actually terrible for the environment and the world in general. But they are actually looking at reactors that have been around since, very long times ago. The 1960s and what have you. Fukushima was a very rare incident. In fact, there was not a nuclear disaster in a sizable nuclear disaster for several years before Fukushima happened, and that was only caused by one of the rarest tsunamis that had ever happened on Earth. Is actually one of the biggest. But if you're really looking at the cost of these reactors, yes, it's expensive to build them at first, but over time, since they do last hundreds of years, they actually are far cheaper over time than a coal plant is, whenever you're having to pay the workers, as well as keep the land grants up and all these other things. And then you don't have to expand it like you would have to do for a coal mining operation. You don't have to pay a buttload of money for upkeep like you do on the not reactors, but the wind and solar energy, which actually produces way less energy than the nuclear power plants. The nuclear power plants create I think estimates range right now, if we were to switch completely to nuclear power, 91% of the world's energy would be generated by the nuclear power that we actually have right now, if we went full blast on the nuclear energy. Not only that, but there are safer alternatives coming out every day for the new nuclear reactors, such as thorium reactors, which are actually not a fissile like the uranium that we use in our current reactors. They're actually fertile, which means that they have to use another element to make them work. It actually produces a lot more energy than uranium does. It also produces far less nuclear waste and far less hazardous nuclear waste in the long term. And not only that, but if there is a meltdown in the reactor, there's a meltable cork that happens to be right underneath the thorium. And if it melts, it's going to melt through the cork. The thorium falls into another container. You can keep that thorium there and still reuse it. Even though it overheated, it shuts down the meltdown, and you can also reuse that material. It's far better for the environment. But if you're looking at people like Greenpeace, for instance, they don't usually tell you about these things. They actually try to fearmonger with nuclear power, with the Fukushima disasters, the newest ones they're going after, things like Chernobyl, things like 3 Mile Island, which are horrible disasters that happened. And, these places are condemned for hundreds of years. But if you're looking at thorium reactors don't last for hundreds. They don't actually stay radioactive by themselves. So if there is a meltdown, like I said, it would fall through. It would be absolutely nullified the second that the meltdown happens almost. Not only that, but it actually is more common to find thorium right now in the Earth's crust than it is to find uranium. It's a lot. It actually takes less thorium to create as much power as does uranium. So if we take 1 ton of thorium, we actually produce the same amount of energy that 100 tons of uranium that we use in the reactors do right now. And to top that all off, 1 ton of thorium is equal to 3.5 million tons of coal. Now, if that doesn't tell you right there how much energy we would be producing with these new nuclear reactors, I don't think you know what's good for energy, because it's a huge gap. It's a very huge gap. But that's my end of my opening statement. So go ahead, Dolphin.
All right, thank you. Excellent opening statements, guys. As I told you earlier, this debate will be slightly different than our previous debates. We're going to be changing up things a little bit. And at this point, we're going to allow Direwolf 5 minutes for rebuttal and questions for Pod.
All right. So you started off talking about coal, which is kind of a funny tactic because coal is not what I'm referring to. I'm using solar and wind and other renewables, coal being also more expensive recently due to government regulation. But since you brought it up, coal and nuclear power have a lot of the same problem because, uranium has to be mined. It has a lot of the same problems of having to tear up the ground and all the pollution caused by that equipment and all the fossil fuels used to mine that uranium. And you know what? Yes, less uranium per coal, but it takes a lot more material mined to get that small amount of uranium out of the ground. So it is relatively close in the damage to the environment, just based off of the damage to the ground. Also, it's far worse in those other countries that aren't America that don't have our strict regulations on mining. Other countries are tearing up their environment and causing a lot of destruction because they're seeking nuclear power. Now, let's talk about the waste. The waste generated by nuclear reactors remains reactive for tens of hundreds of thousands of years. Currently, there is no long-term storage solution for radioactive waste. Most of it is stored in temporary above-ground facilities. These facilities are running on out of storage space, so that the nuclear industry is turning to other types of storage and are more costly and potentially less safe. So as we produce more, our options for where we're storing are becoming less safe. There are 10 radioactive waste accidents in the U.S. since 1952. There was 12 in France, 6 in Germany, 20 in Japan, 108 minor ones in total, 57 major incidents in total, according to the International Atomic Energy Agency. Radioactive waste spills and environmental accidents are not rare. They're common. So the first part about saying that it's a low risk, that's a lie. And plus, we're just betting on just winning the bet that there won't be some sort of earthquake or big storm that will cause. Can you pause my time? I'm sorry. That was a doorbell.
Do you have a question for Pod in the meantime? Oh, I'm sorry. We're going to be pausing the broadcast for just a moment while Direwolf goes and sees what kind of caveman energy-hating human being is banging on his door. We really need a soundboard. I could play the Jeopardy theme at this point.
Sorry, my wife locked herself out of the house.
You know, I'm going to take away 2 points from your total score for having a stupid wife.
Fair enough. Fair enough. I deserve that.
All right. You're going.
As for the IFR reactors, there's only ever been a single prototype in the U.S. The project was canceled by Congress in 1994 for reasons including funding, doubts about whether it was needed, and also concerns about its potential proliferation. So the IFR offers two potential pathways to also creating nuclear waste that can be used for weapons. Now, I can go into the details on it, but basically this can be turned into a uranium-238 with some processing, whereas waste from other reactors can't be turned into weapons. So that's one reason why they don't want to use the IFR reactors. The other thing you said was that they are cheaper than...
Do you have any questions for the Politipod that you want them to answer?
Yeah, actually, I do.
Okay,
so you said that there was not that many deaths compared to how many reactors, and there's currently in the world over 400, somewhere around 450 different power plants, right? So there's been a lot more deaths than 450. There's been thousands, 4,000 alone from Chernobyl. So my question is, are you willing to take the risk that just one terrorist goes to, or one big disaster goes off in America and thousands of people die in one of those many communities that live around power plants within 50 miles? Are you willing to accept that risk just to have a lower power bill?
I'm certainly willing to take that risk, and let me tell you why. I don't see anyone having and raising concerns about dam security, especially in areas such as where I live right now. We have one of the most powerful dams in the entirety of the U.S. called Dale Hollow Dam. It actually could, if it cracked and broke from an explosion or something of that sort, would actually probably flood and kill thousands of people in the Tennessee, Kentucky area. It would not only do that, it would also create some of the biggest property damage we've ever seen in the U.S. If you're going to go off of the terrorist threats, I don't think there's hardly ever been an attack on a reactor. And if you're really looking at security measures for the reactor, well, that's a separate discussion we can certainly have. But I don't think it's great for people to come out and say, well, there's going to be a nuclear attack when it doesn't really happen. It's actually rarer than an attack on an airplane.
All right, excellent. Direwolf, you have 1:30 left on your time. If you have any further questions for Potter, if you want to extrapolate on that point, feel free to do so, and you may begin.
There's a huge difference between a dam and a nuclear power plant. When a nuclear power plant goes off, it irradiates the area and causes a lasting damage where you can't even build in that area for a very long time. Yeah, there's the risk to a dam, but it's not the same consequence for them going for a nuclear reactor. You're creating a big dirty bomb, or they could turn into a gigantic dirty bomb. So that's far more severe. So I guess another question for you would be, how much faith do you have in these reactors that are aged and not being replaced? You said that they have a lifetime of 100 years. Well, a lot of them are already being shut down because they're failing. So, I mean, they're approaching their lifetime, and it's going to cost a lot of money to replace all these things. And we're already using less and less nuclear power. Why don't we just use more solar and wind power.
Well, I actually didn't say 100 years. I said hundreds of years, because these nuclear reactors can literally, with maintenance, be kept up for hundreds, if not thousands of years. The problem is that there's so many U.S. regulations on them, not only from the Obama era, but in several eras before that, all the way back to, I believe it was Jimmy Carter who first started a lot of these after the 3 Mile Island disaster. You can check my numbers on that, but I think that's correct. There have been several regulations that actually prohibit people from upgrading their reactors, from switching them to different types of reactors. There's been lots of legislation and bureaucracy in the way, and a lot of red tape to cut through to even get these reactors back up in maintenance. It's insane the amount of money and ribbon cutting that people have to do. And I think this goes for not only just the nuclear energy business, but all energy businesses at the moment. There's so much red tape and go through and money that you have to pay to people that it's really not worth it to keep these reactors opening. I think if we remove the bureaucracy from that, you would actually see more of these reactors having upkeep done to them and keeping them open instead of having them closed down after they're starting to tear down, and that actually risks more reactor leaks and meltdowns than does maintaining it. It's the bureaucracy which is probably causing a lot of these reactors to be shut down. Not only that, if you're really looking into like stuff like that dirty bomb of what you're speaking about, there's only been if I'm not correct, please correct me on this, but I think there's only been about a dozen attempts of an attack on any nuclear power plant in the world. So it's really not feasible for you to sit there and try to, guesstimate on what's going to happen 100 years down the line. Not only that, like I said, security is a separate issue altogether. I would assume that the TSA would keep terrorists out, but of course that's not always the case. But if we want to talk about that,
wrap it up.
Even the Mexican border.
We can certainly have a discussion on that.
All right, Wolf, you have 34 seconds left to finalize your side of the rebuttals. Go ahead.
Well, just I believe last year or the year before that, there was a report that came out that they believe that Russia and other enemy state actors may have already put electronic routes into our industry, like our power plants, where they could put bugs in there that they could possibly cause a failure. Our network security has been breached many times in our power industries and other areas. It's a real risk. I'm done.
All right.
Okay, is it my turn?
It's probably his turn.
Is it my turn now, Dolphin?
And that ends Wolf's rebuttal and questions. During the rebuttal and questions time, you can ask any questions of your opponent and feel free to rebut them. When you ask a question, by the way, I feel bad for not telling Wolf this before I started. As soon as you finish asking that and the person begins answering, I'm going to stop your time and allow you to keep the rest on the clock. All right? Pod, you are free to go.
Fair enough. So I'm going to start off with the end of his argument there. Okay, I hear a lot of whatabouts and possiblies and all these guesses on your part for these nuclear disasters that are supposedly going to happen from Russia or what have you. There supposedly was an attack on an Israeli power plant by North Korea a few years ago. There was supposedly Russia was putting bugs into these things. And the problem with that is that you don't know. And here's the other problem. That's a cybersecurity risk overall. That could go from anywhere to nuclear weapons all the way up to our state cybersecurity systems, all the way up to federal level. That's not just a nuclear reactor thing. That would be an issue with cybersecurity as a whole in America, not a nuclear problem. That is the definition of cybersecurity awareness. You have to be aware of these things if that is happening. I don't hear anything that is I hear a lot of possibles. I hear a lot of guesses. I don't hear any solid, concrete evidence to prove that this is what's going to happen in 10 years. It sounds a lot like Y2K to me, where everyone was like, well, someone like China is going to get into our system. They're going to launch all of our nukes on 2000 on whenever the year starts because there's a bug in it. It sounds a lot like Y2K fever to me. Not only that, but you were talking earlier about the uranium power plants. And as I said in my starting comment, I don't think we should be using uranium power plants anymore because we have this new thing called thorium. Now, Thorium produces far more energy than uranium does. It does not create any weapons of mass or any off breeds of weapons of mass destruction. You cannot use any of the materials inside of that thorium reactor for a nuclear bomb. You cannot use any of it because it is a fertile instead of a fissile nuclear element. You cannot do that. It doesn't have something that will automatically go from, let's say it's uranium-238 to uranium-237 or whatever. It doesn't do that. It only creates, if I'm remembering correctly, I think it's like,
plutonium-239.
Yeah, well, that's that's what you use to put up with the thorium to make it work. That's not something that it produces, though. That's the plutonium you use in it. Not only that, but you were talking about the storage. The thorium doesn't need to be stored as much. It's something that you can use. You can literally hold a brick of thorium in your hand without it causing any damage to you or the people around you. Whereas uranium, you would actually be mining and looking very hard for the uranium. Thorium is about 99% more in all of the like coal mining and all the uranium mining and lithium and all this stuff, a lot of that stuff that we mine up that we don't use is actually thorium. We could use all of that for nuclear reactors, and you don't have to store the waste as much because it actually produces, I think it's 75% less nuclear waste. Not only that, the yield on it is not as long. It doesn't take as long for it to, not be radioactive anymore. Aside from that, you were talking about the, hang on one second. You're talking about the meltdowns that we've had in the U.S. I might have been wrong on the numbers. I can't really tell right now. I don't have a chart in front of me. Unfortunately, I'm still on my cell phone like last time. But I can guarantee you that they are not as common as you are suspecting, and especially the thorium ones, because there's only a handful of thorium ones right now. And like I said, the bureaucracy that gets in the way of making these new thorium reactors is actually prohibiting people from producing actual renewable energy that is far better than uranium, far better than any type of solar or wind or coal energy. Any energy that you can think of aside from probably like fusion or fission energy it's the best that we have right now is thorium and plutonium reactors. But I'm going to ask you this. Do you actually think that the thorium reactors pose any threat to the general public if we were to start transitioning the uranium reactors we have now to the thorium reactors?
Yeah, have you ever heard of a wind turbine melting down? But the next part of that is, you said there is no byproducts that are dangerous. Well, once the IFR offers two different proliferation pathways. Once is separated from most of the highly radioactive fission products from the less radioactive parts, means that there's an experimental process known as pyroprocessing, which is easier to extract the plutonium-239 from the transurgence. What? Okay, by means of conventional chemical reprocessing, and use it to produce nuclear weapons. There is a process of doing that. An alternative proliferation pathway is to modify the IRF to enable it to be used as a breeder reactor for producing weapons grade plutonium from uranium-238. This is all from a study in Weimar.
Okay, here's the problem with what you just said. The IFR reactor is not the thorium reactor that I'm referring to. I said thorium, not IFR.
Oh, my bad, sorry.
That is a completely different reactor from what we're talking about. I said, does thorium pose a problem for the general public if we switched it from uranium to thorium?
Yes, okay. So for thorium, yes, you're still producing less waste. You're still producing waste that's radioactive that has to be stored. And like I said, we have a problem with not having enough places to store it. And just because you're producing less of it, just because the thorium itself is not dangerous, the byproducts it creates are. And it can still, if there's a breach in containment of the reactor, there's still all the other byproducts that can get out and that can irradiate the area. Much less safe than, say, a solar panel that's never once melted down ever and never will. You can't have a terrorist put some code into a wind turbine and turn it into a bomb. You can't have a terrorist blow up a solar panel and do anything other than damage a solar panel.
Okay.
All right. All right, Pod. That leaves you with 25 seconds for rebuttal. Go ahead.
Okay. So let me just say this: the thorium and the plutonium reactors actually don't create any byproducts that can be used for weaponry. That is actually false. You cannot make any weapons with that plutonium and thorium reactor. Also, if there was any type of meltdown, like I said in the beginning statement, there is a meltable cork inside of that reactor that would actually melt through, and all the thorium would fall through into a separate vat, which you can now collect later and use it in the same reactor without a meltdown.
Time. And Pod, that concludes your rebuttal session. At this point, I'm going to ask each of you a question. And before I do that, I'm going to go ahead and ask both of you a question. I'm going to ask you to do it in turn. Please.
12 inches.
Direwolf, for the audience, please pronounce the word that is spelled Nuclear.
Nuclear.
Pod? Same question.
Nuclear.
There we go. And for all of you out there who said nuclear, you are wrong. Anyway, Direwolf, I have a special question for you, and that is using fuel oil and other fossil fuels sustainable? Nuclear energy is by far the most efficient and has the highest yield to fuel ratio. If we become spacefaring species, what kind of energy should we use in that pursuit?
You're definitely not going to be using wind in space. But solar panels are very common use of gathering energy in space. And we are bettering the technology. The cost of producing solar panels has gone drastically down in the last 10 years, and we're becoming more efficient. So I think that since they cost less fossil fuels to produce than in any other renewable, and they are safer than nuclear, that we should use that.
Lost.
I'll do that. Bug you, because it's also good for space travel, since that's your ultimate goal.
All right, and the Politipod. My question for you is that the thorium reactors that you're speaking of have been highly controversial, and a tremendous number of nuclear physicists and chemists have stepped out and said that this is not a functional and legitimate form of nuclear energy. Has there ever been any functional system that acts as a proof of concept? And if so, can you provide sources and tell us where and when that system operated?
You're talking about a nuclear reactor that's up right now that's thorium-based?
I'm talking about any proof of concept throughout the nuclear history.
Throughout the nuclear history for that reactor.
For a thorium-based reactor, yes.
Yeah, thorium-based reactor. So there are actually, from the World Nuclear Association, there's actually 7 types of reactors that you can use thorium for. You can use the heavy water reactors, which are PHWRs, high-temperature gas-cooled reactors, which are HTRs, boiling light water reactors, which are BWRs, pressurized light water reactors, which are PWRs, fast neutron reactors, which are FNRs, and molten salt reactors, which are MSRs and LFTRs. The Oak Ridge National Laboratory actually designed the MSR, which actually operated from 1965 to 1969, and was actually where we started beginning thorium. We actually start to see the beginnings of where thorium reactors started to get their concept from, was from that lab, because they were originally using uranium-233 and then switched to thorium-232. There are actually a few power projects right now. There are some in the United States, United Kingdom, Germany, Brazil, India, China, France, Czech Republic, Japan, Russia, Canada, Israel, and the Netherlands, and including one by the European Organization for Nuclear Research, which is CERN, which you probably know CERN from the nuclear collider that they have. And actually, in 2013, they focused on thorium as an alternative to nuclear technology without requiring production of nuclear waste. And experts such as Hans Blix, who is the actual former head of the International Atomic Energy Agency, called for expanded support for new nuclear power technologies, and states thorium options offer the world not only a new sustainable supply of fuel for nuclear power, but also one that makes better use of the fuel's energy content. So
that
you know, we have lots of people who are actually supporting this. Not only CERN, which is I would argue is the more chief technology researcher on that end, but also some of the heads of various nuclear branches and such like that. But yeah, they tested it in the Oak Ridge National Laboratory in Tennessee, and they found that it did work. The problem is, like I said, bureaucracy's gotten in the way, and it's actually costing lots of people and lots of money to make these reactors. There are 2 prototype thorium MSRs in 2015, or they were built in 2012 to 2015 in China. And they've been working just fine. Project was $400 million and required 400 workers to make.
Thank you, Pod, for that very well detailed response. For those of you watching in the audience, you may have noticed that there's this little bird on the bottom right-hand corner of your screen with these giant glasses that has been watching every single one of you as you've been asking your questions and posting them in the chat. And at this point, he's going to take over the show for just a short period of time, and he's going to present our 2 competitors with some questions from you, the audience. Pod, I'm sorry, Chair, take this away.
There's only like 2.
Oh, by the way, that reminds me, if you have any questions for our competitors, now would be a good time to post them in the side chat.
Okay, there's a point about Direwolf's last opening argument. Basically, they were asking if it was. They said it was a bit of an exaggeration what you were saying, and they wanted to know if it was exclusive to the nuclear sector or all energy sectors.
What?
I don't know which part he was referring to exactly. He didn't specify.
Okay.
That's we need a general that.
You were talking about nuclear disasters and whatnot.
Okay. So yeah, that was from the
Placeholder.
Yeah, let me find that real quick. There was a international research group that found that there was 100 and I believe. Let me try to find that spot. Sorry. There's over 100 of minor and 57 major incidences. Those things included not only meltdowns, because meltdowns don't make up the majority of the accidents. A lot of them were, say, a radioactive spill, a container falling off a truck, for instance. That's not an exact situation, but falling off a truck and then going into a waterway and then irradiating the water of a small community. That's one example. So the transport of this waste, the storage of this waste, and the site itself are all places where disaster could happen. It's not just the power plant; it's all the waste that's produced and transported.
Okay. Well, that's a good clarification there.
Oh, but he's right. One thing is that there is a lot of waste related to other industries. There's just far less waste. So there's actually some radioactive waste produced in mining. There's a lot of other chemicals that go in the ground from mining that are really dangerous. That's why I'm not for coal here. This doesn't affect solar or wind.
Okay.
I'd like to also make a point on what you were saying about the attacks on there, if I may, Chair. Just real quick.
Hey, it wasn't your turn.
No, go for it.
All right. So I'm not sure if you know this, but there has actually been far more attacks on things such as wind turbines and solar panels than there have been attacks on nuclear reactors. And in fact, the University of Tulsa brought a group of students into a wind turbine, and they found out that they could actually hack from one turbine an entire wind farm. From one turbine, they can hack the entirety of them and make them stop working and put so many backdoors and walls in there that no one would be able to unhack that for several days.
Do you know that any kind of attack on our nuclear industry would not be, you wouldn't find out about it because that'd be a huge blight on our country?
But I haven't seen any nuclear reactors blow up from somebody going
attempts though.
You're over here making speculations about nuclear energy, but I can give you several literal things that happened to wind turbines and solar farms. There was a Maoist attack on a solar farm not 2 years ago in I think it was some Southeast Asian country.
And how much land was it? How many years was that land unusable because of it?
Oh, they're none, but they lost a lot of power. They lost a lot
Oh
of
God,
time, effort,
lost
and money.
power, no thousands of lives lost, no land destroyed. Okay.
You also forget
I guess,
about
can you give me one modern example of thousands of lives being lost by a nuclear reactor?
Chernobyl.
I can't. Chernobyl's not a modern one.
Also,
Chernobyl was
there's
back in
Fukushima. They
1951.
a local study said they had already between 400 and 600 cancer deaths in the area due to higher cancer rates, mostly leukemia, childhood cancers that are uncommon anywhere else in Japan except for in that area. And then they're predicting around 1,600 deaths based off that ratio of just the years so far.
So they're predicting it.
Hold on, just a second, just for clarification, Wolf. Are those numbers that you just gave? Is that the difference between the previous rate and the current rate, or is that the current rate?
That is the increase.
Okay.
Yeah, Fukushima was pretty bad. I would consider Fukushima to be modern, but I mean,
Was that a terrorist attack?
No, that was environmental. And that's
Okay,
how
it was
little control we have.
That iceberg screamed Allahu Akbar as it
You're
roared
kidding.
into the ocean.
Hang on one second, Dolphin. So what you're telling me is that we can't control the environment.
Right.
You know what else we can't control? If the sun sets off a solar flare and kills everyone on Earth, we can't.
Right.
We have no control of the elements. That is such a crazy thing that happened in Fukushima. That is one of the biggest tsunamis that ever was recorded on Earth. And it's
Well, it would have been
very
so
rare
bad if we
that
had
it
had 3 reactors go down.
Okay, so what's your excuse for not having them, let's say, in the heartland of America or somewhere that's landlocked? What's going to happen
Earthquakes.
there?
We have 15 power plants, sites, which have more than one power plant in high-risk earthquake zones. A lot of them in California, by the way. That's dumb. Right next to the fault.
Okay.
But again,
How
I
many
thought,
of
okay,
the-
if
how many of the
California...
California reactors have went down from earthquakes? Because California has earthquakes all the time.
None
how
yet,
many-
but it only takes the one.
It only takes the one, what? The San Andreas fault splitting, or is it
Yes.
like a magnitude 2.0
Earthquake bad enough.
Because there's a huge difference from the San Andreas fault setting off one of the largest earthquakes ever recording on Earth, and actually probably killing most of the western part of the U.S., as opposed to a bunch of nuclear reactors going off after a 2.1 earthquake in some little town, and then it sets off every single nuclear
Okay,
reactor.
so some
You have to be
earthquakes can set
specific
off
with these
some
examples.
power plants, but no earthquakes will ever set off a wind turbine.
Yeah, because an earthquake would never be able to break a wind turbine to the extent of it falling over and not being able to work.
And destroying the land for 40 years, right?
Well, I would say that if the San Andreas fault or the New Madrid fault line in America were to have a giant earthquake, it wouldn't matter if the nuclear reactors went off.
It doesn't have to be that bad.
There would be so much.
It's not in the right
Then
spot.
how come there's no reactors that are melting down right now in California? There was just an earthquake a few months ago that was like a 5.6 or something.
It matters where the earthquake is, Politipod.
I'm well aware of that, but California is one of the highest risk zone for earthquakes in America.
So you have a
It's
higher
not like
chance
they
of being in the right
it's not
spot at
like
the
they
right
have-
time.
Okay, it's not like they have one every year. It's like they have like 70 to 100 every year.
You're making my point for me. There's a higher chance it's going to be in the right spot to set off the power plant.
But they're not going off, is my point.
Because they
aren't
haven't landed in the
going
right
off.
spot yet, but they could. You're playing with fire here. You're playing with nuclear fire.
They're not going off in what spot, Dire Wolf? You realize that tectonic plates don't work in every single part of California, right? It's
I
not like
realize that.
every
but-
single part of the Earth can move at once in conjunction and break the entirety of California in half. It's a giant fault line that it's on that makes it that way.
see,
Yes, and it
fault
could
lines
happen
split.
in the area of the power plant, but it
Are
hasn't
they
happened
built-
yet.
Are they built on the fault line? Are they built within 100 miles of the fault line?
They
Or
are built awfully close to. I can't give you a mileage from a map. It's just like bubbles of severity. I
Hey,
didn't
Why not?
measure it.
I'm sure there's a map out there that has that. I can guarantee it.
hey,
Well, it
Pod,
might-
I need to ask Pod a question. Are you aware that they made a nuclear bomb using 232 TH as a source of 233 in 1955?
In 1955, what was the name of the bomb, and how much yield did it have?
I don't know. Dave will tell us in a second.
Let's hope he
Well,
knows.
that's awfully nice of him to tell me that there was a bomb created and without the yield. Unless this is the size of a current nuclear blast, which is
Yeah.
several kilotons, I don't think it's really going to matter that much.
Platypod, there's one thing you're missing. There's a really important point. Inside of the city limits of Chico, California, if you set off a nuclear device, you have to pay $500 fine. That's a pretty serious fine.
A
No
$500 fine?
no criminal is going to want to pay that fine.
Right.
Are
So
you sure it's not a $500,000 fine?
and it's any nuclear device set off in Chico, California, you have to pay $500. So that's one reason why we shouldn't have nuclear power plants.
It's because Chico, California. I've never even heard of Chico, California. Where is this?
It's a real place. It's a real law.
I've never. Okay. I don't know what that has to do with nuclear energy, but okay.
Well, it's an excellent comedic addition to the ridiculous regulations surrounding nuclear power. So you should have actually pulled it in on your own side there, Pod.
Yeah.
You're
By the way, I got to say this as well. If you're talking about uranium-230, or excuse me, not uranium. Oh well, uranium-233 and thorium-232. The problem with that argument right there is the materials that come out of the power plant is the thing that we're worried about, because whenever we get done with the material inside the power plant in our uranium reactor, we have to then worry about it being used as a bomb. That's what the main problem with the uranium reactors is right now. Thorium reactors don't produce anything like that. They don't produce any of that material. It's the stuff inside of it that is that. And of course, there's going to be nuclear material that can set off a bomb. That's how the energy works. It fuses to, or it's a fission reactor that creates energy through it and creates a vast amount of energy through its yield. It's not like coal where you just burn it and it just goes up in the air. It's a lot. I'm not a nuclear engineer or a nuclear scientist by any stretch of the imagination, but I am certainly simplifying this by saying that it would take a lot of effort to get all of those materials out of that reactor and then use that as a bomb.
Well, part of the problem is other countries. We have Argentina, Australia, Brazil, Iran, Libya, and South Korea and Taiwan that have all used civil energy, nuclear energy, as a cover for making nuclear weapons. And thorium reactors can use that uranium-233, which can be used to make nuclear weapons. So other countries, like they have in India and Russia, can use thorium reactors and then use that as a cover for making nuclear weapons.
Okay.
So you're talking about in the sense of us having these thorium reactors and us not having to worry about us making nuclear materials, but other countries can use these reactors too, and then be making these nuclear materials for bombs.
Okay. So if they've already got the materials to make a uranium bomb, like most of the countries that you just listed, like Iran or somewhere like China, or you said South Korea, but I think you mean North Korea. All these places already have nuclear capabilities. It doesn't matter if they use the thorium or not. They already have uranium that is able to be produced easily and also used as a bomb. It's not anything different than what is going on right now with uranium.
Right. So another country starting their own nuclear energy production, quote unquote, could actually be using it as a cover to make bombs, what I'm saying. I'm not saying the people who already have nuclear capabilities. I'm worried about them. I'm worried about other countries getting the technology and saying it's for civil uses, but really using it to develop more bombs. And now we have more bombs in the hands of more dangerous people.
We already have bombs in the hands of dangerous people.
Do you want more?
I would argue that China and Russia are very dangerous right now.
I agree with you.
How about North Korea? Is North Korea dangerous?
Yes, a little bit.
You're kidding me. So what you're telling me is that madmen are going to use weapons to kill people.
Yes. And that's why there shouldn't be nuclear power.
Okay. So there shouldn't be nuclear power because it's a possibility of weapons being made. Well, here,
yes.
let me red pill you on something right now. Did you know that you use iron in most of your utensils? If you use iron, that means that people can make bullets, which can then be put into actual rounds, and then they can be shot at people. Do you want that in your house? Do you want that? Do you want that? Do you want that, Direwolf?
Yes, I want the iron in my. I want my forks, but that's a very, very different by orders of magnitude.
There's gunpowder in. Did you know that there's gunpowder in fireworks? You can actually kill people with fireworks too.
You can.
Do you want a madman getting his hand on gunpowder? Do you know what?
All right. Hold on.
You know, fireworks are restricted in a lot of places, right?
Okay, that's a different debate.
99% of all drownings happen in water, but we need to go back to Chair.
Okay,
we need to go back to Chair because he has other questions.
Okay, the bomb apparently was called zucchini, and it was a yield of 28 kilotons. That's what I'm being told.
28 kilotons.
Mm-hmm.
Uh-huh.
Operation Teapot, apparently.
Operation Teapot, which is a uranium-233 bomb, which was not anything to do with thorium. a thorium reactor doesn't have to have uranium-233. It has to have plutonium. It's not a strictly you can use uranium for it, but plutonium's a far safer option. So what I would say is that the use of plutonium is probably going to be a far better alternative to what he's suggesting, uranium-233.
So is the argument here pretty much that we shouldn't use nuclear energy because other people might misuse it?
That's part of the argument. It's also because there's a very large chance that eventually that their accidents will happen and that we will also have a huge disaster in our own country. It also becomes a risk that someone may attack them. It's a big target because it's a place where they can attack and do a lot of damage, lasting damage.
Ooh, okay. Direwolf.
Yep.
I got another question for you. What do you have to say about toxic waste produced by solar panels being much higher than nuclear waste? And do you believe we can fix the problem by extending the life of solar panels or by making more of them that are made from biodegradable materials?
So yeah, definitely some of the earlier materials were wasteful, but there have actually been a lot of advances towards making them less wasteful and a lot more environmentally conscious.
Mm-hmm. By the way, you're saying your previous argument about the dangers of people misusing nuclear energy was a shit argument.
Hey, you know what? I'm playing devil's advocate for you guys. I'm giving you all the arguments that are available.
Okay, I got one more fun one for everybody. Okay, for everyone here, I guess we could all answer this one. But if you were to gain superpowers from radiation exposures, what would the powers be?
If you were to get superpowers from radiation exposure,
yeah,
definitely any Spider-Man power. Spider-Man was bitten by a radioactive spider, so there you go.
You don't want the X-ray vision?
Yeah, I can live without X-ray vision. Spider-Man's got cool powers.
I guess I'd be Superman because no one can beat Superman. I mean,
Superman doesn't have radioactive powers.
I'm pretty sure if the nuclear reactors all fail, we're all going to grow an extra dick, especially the feminists who will grow too.
One on their forehead.
One on their face. And it'll be an evolutionary change so that they can have something to put in their mouth to shut them up.
Right.
The point is, that brings us to our final section of the debate, and that is the scoring. And gentlemen, drum roll, please. And let's have it. Eggman de Nosferatu, for the first time, presenting himself before the Academy audience, and give out the score.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Well
Eggman de Nosferatu. Eggman, you are the man. The Egg Man. I think he fell asleep at the wheel.
Okay,
all right, so,
no, I'm here.
Oh, he's a real person?
He is
He's a walrus. Cuckoo, cachoo.
Okay, so the final score is Direwolf, you won with 120. Pod had 90.
Here comes the flip out. Ready?
What?
What?
Is that all you got? Come on.
You're kidding me.
This is gonna be a joke.
You're absolutely kidding me. Right?
Thank you, I appreciate it.
He studied all night and everything.
Sorry, man. I don't make the scores.
Ripperoni. Okay.
To be fair, Pod jumped in last minute, so.
Yeah. Who was it? What's the originally debate? It wasn't Pod.
East South Simon or something like that.
Yeah.
Well, it's not debating you, man. Just for everyone who's watching this, I completely agree with Pod on everything he said.
Yeah.
In that case, well debated, my friend, who has won this debate without even believing in the thing that he was debating.
That's the best part of this.
Unfortunately, because Pod is in the lead for the entire season, you will still have to hang in your head in shame as you walk away, knowing that you will have a chance to come back. We definitely want you to come back. And for those of you who have enjoyed the stream, have enjoyed the charity, please jump over to the cunt stream. There is currently a charity going on for our good friend Maddie the News Wench, or I'm sorry, is that no? Yeah, that's right, Maddie the News Chick. Damn my misogyny.
Mad
Dolphin.
Woman Muses.
Mad woman muses.
Not even close.
I know her. I know her as Maddie the news chick, and my misogynistic brain instantly changes it to wench. So be sure to check out her stream. She did just lose her daughter. Our thoughts and prayers, however worthless or worthful they are or valuable they are to her, do in fact go out to her. So jump over to the cunt stream. It's going to be lots of fun. I'm going to try and get in there and sing a song for them, raise some money, and help out Maddie. And we'll see you guys back here next week. We are here every Friday, the Academy Debate Show. Thank you.